Okay, thank you. We're recording.
Thank you so much.
So today we will be talking about what the elements of a contract are. Now you have seen some of that already, obviously, in the previous course. We'll go a little bit more detail today, and we'll talk a little bit about how to negotiate and write a contract, although not in great detail, but we'll be talking about the different parts, in particular a supply chain, a buying contract, and then what kind of contracts there are. And I want to spend a little more time with that because it's not something that most people know very much about. And we tend to think of only one kind of a contract when we're when we're doing, buying and selling. And it just so happens I have experience with several different kinds of contracts, managing them as a contract manager. Usually they're used in larger contracts, but it's good to know because there's a lot of different situations that you can do and cover very, very nicely if you just have a little bit of knowledge about different kinds of contracts. Then you can go and look them up. You don't have to memorize them or anything like that, but just knowing that they exist and that there are other ways of writing contracts to cover different kind of situations. So then we'll talk about long-term contracts and when they are a good thing to do and when you would probably want to avoid them. And then what they call here non-traditional contracting, which is some of the newer areas like IT and things like that, which don't lend themselves well to traditional contracting methods. No, my clicker doesn't. Let's see if I can get my clicker to work. There we go. So just kind of going back a little bit, we talked about trust last week. I'd like just some people to comment to finish this sentence for us. I trust more people, or I trust people more if they
are honest.
They speak truth.
If they are honest, yep. Okay.
Honest.
If they're honest, yep.
If they keep their promises.
If they what?
If they keep their promises.
Oh, yes. Keep their promises. Yes.
Reliable.
If they are reliable.
If they
Speak truth.
They have recommendations.
Say more about that.
They are recommended from by other people.
Ah, yes. So if other people have recommended them, yes. There was somebody else.
Professionally speaking, I trust people more if they are knowledgeable
Ah,
in what they do,
okay.
professionally speaking.
Yeah. How about personally?
I trust people more if they walk the talk.
Ah, good. Two more. Daisy.
I trust people more if they are my family.
Okay. And why?
I think people in the same family is more trustful than stranger.
Well, we can't hear you very well, Daisy. Could you speak up? Say it again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I just think that people in the same family is more trustful and honest than strangers.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Daisy.
Okay.
One more.
Can we say if they trust me?
I can't hear you. Rahab, what?
Yeah, I trust people more if they trust me.
If they trust you. Okay. And how do you know if they trust you?
With dealing with them, and it's not 100% sure, but when they deal with me, they give me accurate information, honest in what, or they say what they can do.
Okay. All right. Good. Good. So think about all of those as we go through the talk today about contracts. And when you are putting words in a contract, are you putting the words there because you don't trust them? So are you negotiating the contract because you basically don't trust the other person? So you want to get words in there to make sure that you'll get what you want and make sure that they do what they're going to do. Because what we find is that even like and we'll see it later today, a lot of the time we spend, negotiating a contract, the effort we spend is because we basically don't trust the other person. And so we think we must get it in writing, and the terms must be more in our favor than they are in the other side, because I don't trust that they'll do what they said they're going to do. So just think about trust as we go along, and notice that so much of the work we do and the words we write and come about as a result of lack of trust. And so how it would be a lot easier if we just chose to trust people a little more. Okay. So managing relationships. Of course, we can't predict everything, and so that's one of the problems, is you just don't know. It's impossible to predict. It just won't happen. You don't know what's going to go on. You don't know everything that's going to happen. So, but it is important to go, like, not just think about the legal. The lawyers will tell you have to do this and you have to do that. But when you're talking about relationships, it really is important that you go beyond that and not get all hung up on the legal, and get more into negotiating things that will illustrate that you do give the other party a bit of trust. You understand what they're trying to do, and you're willing to work together. And then once the contract's been signed, that's true, because most of the work that I've done in managing, in some cases, very large contracts, I wasn't involved in the contract negotiation at all. I joined the company, after they had won the contract, and I was the contract manager while as a seller. Once the work had started. So once the contract's been signed, the real work begins in making sure that things go smoothly. Now, what goes wrong? Here are things that go wrong. People, either they sign the contract just because they think they need to, and they haven't really understood it and read it. So then when they start working on the contract, they got partway through and they find out, oh, really? Oh, I didn't understand that. Oh, I didn't think that's what we signed up for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, is that what those words mean? So people often sign contracts without really understanding them, okay? And of course, then the other way you go is you contact your lawyers and make sure the lawyers tell you what they mean. But so especially if it's a repetitive contract or you've done a few of them, it's good to really get to understand them. And especially if, and even as a buyer, you're imposing terms and conditions, or you're issuing an RFP. It's really good to understand your own contract. Some buyers insist that suppliers use their form of contract and their standard form contract. But even as a buyer, people don't understand the terms that are in their own contract, the contract that they're asking people to sign. So that when the seller says, oh, could you explain, clause 13 to me? and you really, the buyer really can't do it very well, that doesn't go over, doesn't contribute very well to, you know, good relationship building. And then when the other side also then says, well, can we change Article 13? Or and you say, no, we can't change Article 13 because, you know, that's part of the standard terms and conditions. I can't change that. Well, could you explain it to me? I don't really understand it. And at least be able to have a conversation about it. So even as a buyer, if you are imposing a contract, it's very important to understand what your contract says. We make assumptions that often are not true. You know, we assume that that things will go smoothly. We assume that the customer or the suppliers will do as they're told. They'll just do as they're required to do. We make assumptions about environments and things like that that don't turn out to be true at all. And we then ask for things that we really shouldn't be asking for, you know, unreasonable demands, terms and conditions that really are not very fair. And so if we're a buyer, sometimes the supplier will sign up anyway. They'll just sign it, you know, because they want the business. But because they have signed up to something they really would rather not have signed, or you have pushed too hard and they've signed it, then for the rest of the contract, while they're working on the contract or whatever, they're going to try to get back, get some of their money back, or if they've agreed to a price that's too low, they're going to try to do something, to anything they can, to try to get back to where they would have been if they had signed a more normal or a more reasonable contract. So I've told many people, when you're a buyer, it is possible to pay too little. People say, how can that be possible? How can it be possible to pay too little? I mean, we understand about paying too much. I should have paid less. But it is definitely possible to pay too little, to negotiate too hard, to get too low a price, and you really should have agreed to a higher price because life is going to get difficult later on. And then when we're, especially in the international scene now, or when we change different markets, we assume that a contract in the, you know, in the finance business, the terms in a finance contract are the same as the terms in an industrial contract, or we changed a European market versus an Asian market. And there are changes in the market. So you need to understand your market very well. And there's so cultural problems and legal difficulties that you that can be in clauses that you haven't really understood. And then when you're doing a negotiation, it's really important to use your whole team and do your research, and whatever resources you've got available to you, make sure you use them and not try to do it, you know, all yourself. Okay. And what we'll find out also is that even though you've written a contract, that people will say, well, you know, I know we signed the contract, but we've done a lot of those contracts with you and they're all the same, but we've never really gone along like that Article 14. We've never really done that. We just get the job done, and our relationship is important. And so long as everything is okay, that's probably all right to kind of ignore some parts of the contract if it doesn't really matter and neither of you care. You can say, all right, let's just ignore that clause. Probably it should be deleted from the contract. Or what can happen is that it'll work and it'll work and it'll work, and then all of a sudden something happens, and then all of a sudden you'll say, oh, just a minute, this Article 14 is here. Don't you know you have to do that? And the other side will say, well, hold it. No, we never did. We've never used that. It's, you know, we just work together. We figure it out, so that the ongoing relationship kind of overrides what's actually in the contract. And that's okay, so long as it's okay. You know, there's never a problem until there's a problem, right? This is something that is near and dear to my heart, preventive contracting. And there's actually a very good book. Just hold on one second. I'm going to just stop sharing just for a second. And I want to show you a very good book. It's called Preventive Law and Problem Solving. Oh, maybe I have to turn off my background. Okay, I will do that. Okay, because it really is an excellent book. Preventive Law and Problem Solving, Lawyering for the Future. This is written by, actually, he's a law professor in California. But this whole book is about how to kind of avoid using lawyers, really. And the reason I like the book is there's one whole chapter in it called It's a Matter of Trust, written by somebody you know. So I helped write this book, and it is really a very good one. So where you try to do things that prevent or avoid legal problems rather than create legal problems. And the way, one of the key ways you can do that is by work more at the front end. You know, spend more time. Take a little bit longer putting the contract together. It will always pay off. We tend to get into too big of a hurry, and there's a big rush to get the contract done, and there's a deadline, and we've got to get going. And so we find that we spend too little time at the front and get it done, and then we have to fix it later. And fixing it later is always harder than doing it at the front. And being flexible. Don't try to think about what the contract terms you're asking for, and be flexible. Think about what's going on rather than just insisting on certain terms. And like it says here, it costs less to avoid getting into trouble than to get out of trouble, which is true. That a little more time spent working on a clause or just adjusting a clause will pay off more than later on, because when you get the whole legal team involved in lawsuits and whatever. You may have heard the expression, you don't want this to be your motto. Some people say, there's never time to do it right, but there's always time to do it over. So you think about that. There's always a rush. There's never seems to be time to do it right. But if things go wrong, you're going to have to do it over, or you're going to have to fix it. So there's never time to do it right, but there's always time to do it over. Well, don't be that way. Don't let that be your motto. So what does a purchasing contract do? You know, there's a whole bunch of objectives. Obviously, it establishes the terms and conditions that you're going to use. It defines the type of a relationship. It gives the vehicle for parties to benefit from the business transaction. Okay, it describes the payment and all that kind of thing. It represents what the parties understand. You know, that's what the contract's meant to do. Okay, it writes it down. This is what the parties agree to. So, what are the parts of a contract? The basic parts, and you have seen these things before. We'll go through one a little bit. But so obviously the introduction usually identifies the party. Then the clauses are the conditions and all the words that people agree to. That's the main part of the contract. And then usually or often at the back, there are schedules and there are appendices. This is just technical information that is required. You don't need to read it all to understand the contract, but it's reference material. Sometimes you might want to put the delivery schedule at the back, call it Schedule 1, and it'll be the delivery schedule. The next schedule might be the destination points. It could be it's just a lot of facts and information that'll be referred to in the main part of the contract. So the contract itself can just say, delivery shall be done according to the schedule described in attachment A. And so the main contract doesn't have to change. You can just change attachment A. So here are some samples. You've seen these before. The way they're done in North America anyway. The agreement is made on the date and who the parties are. And this is important to say who the parties are, what their address is, and then how you're going to refer to them in the rest of the contract, okay? And where they're incorporated, because that sometimes can have a bearing on law, okay? So then the elements then of the contract are the introduction, definitions. Quite often, this is quite important, that if there are a lot of words in the contract that have a unique meaning, so like, what does the word schedule mean? What does the word acceptance mean? And if it means something other than what you might assume in ordinary English, then you capitalize the word and you define it. In this agreement, contract means agreement. What does the word agreement mean? Capital A. It means this document and all of its attachments, etc. So definitions, it sounds fairly basic, but it can be a very important part of the contract where there are words that need to be understood. The scope of the agreement. This is what does the agreement cover? Purchase orders. It's quite often the contract itself might be kind of a blanket order, and it'll talk about purchase orders that come about as a result of the main contract. So you have a main contract, and then you have purchase orders that are, or sometimes called call-ups, against the main contract. Supply and delivery. What are you supplying? Where? When? And the specifications. All the different things. This can be quality and what are the health regulations, the safety regulations. I mean, this can be very big. It can be very small. It can be one page, or it can be, well, I have seen literally thousands of pages of specifications in very long contracts. Payment. Some people might think this is the most important. When is it going to happen? Where is it going to happen? So how often? What currency? For what? And who's going to make the payment? How will it be made, etc. So payment is a big deal. Liability. Who? And this is where people spend a lot of time. Who is liable for if I make a mistake? Am I liable for if you incur costs as a result of me doing something wrong? Am I liable to pay your costs, etc., etc.? This is one of the biggest ones, and people spend all kinds of time negotiating it, and I think it's a complete waste of time because generally you're arguing over things that are extremely unlikely to happen. Occasionally they do, no question, but the time that is spent on who will pay when who does something wrong is disproportionate. Force majeure. What happens when something occurs that's beyond your control, both of your controls? When does one side get excused? When does the contract start? When does the contract end? And under what terms does it end? What's the effective date? Intellectual property. Who owns the design? If part of the if I'm just selling you something, a thing, I'm selling you the thing, but I'm not selling you any of the rights to the design at all. You don't get to use the design. You can't copy the design. You can't make it, okay? I'm selling you the thing. Or if I'm designing something for you You may say, well, I want to own the design. I'm paying you for the design, so I want to make sure that I own it. So this is a very, very important part of a contract now, especially these days, especially in IT. And it's who owns the intellectual property, the designs, the technical part of the document, of the thing that is being done. Okay. Assignment and contracting. Who can transfer the contract to somebody else? Can you? That probably should say assignment and subcontracting. And so if I'm signed a contract with you to deliver something for me, just, can you give that contract to somebody else and have them do the work for you? I may say, yes, you can do that, so long as you agree, as long as I consent first. But you're still going to be responsible. So if your friend doesn't do it right, you're still responsible. Technology improvements. What happens when, if the technology advances? Can we change the contract? Can we take it? How do we take advantage of those improvements? And these days, that's important, especially in a long-term contract. Like you might not want to sign a contract with a computer store to supply computers for the next 10 years. A particular model of computer, because 2 years from now, you probably don't want that computer because something new has come out. Most favored customer. Quite often governments use that clause now, because the federal government certainly did a long time ago, and they still do. When you're selling to the government, they insist that you sell to them at the lowest price you charge anybody else. In other words, you must treat them as your most favored customer. So if you're selling to several people, the government says, we must be at the lowest price, okay? Or same as. But so you cannot charge us any more than you charge anybody else. We insist that we are the most favored customer. Federal government started that. Confidentiality, keeping things secret, trade secrets, et cetera, not disclosing. Sometimes you may not want your supplier to disclose the fact they sold to you. Who keeps track of statistics? What are the indicators? If it's like a design contract, a services contract, how will you decide whether the services are being done correctly? What are the indicators, and does it affect the way you pay? What's the compensation? How do you give notices to in the contract? There's party A and party B. Do they have to be in writing? Do they have to be sent by mail? If you give a notice of termination, et cetera, et cetera. It's a formality. Severability means, if one part of the contract for some reason gets challenged and is found to be illegal or not enforceable, just maybe one paragraph maybe gets challenged, even if one part of the contract might be unenforceable, that doesn't mean the whole contract's unenforceable. The rest of the contract survives. So that's what severability is. We're not going to go through these in any great detail. Third-party rights and free trade areas. These are mostly discussed in your textbook. If anybody has any questions over those, but you can certainly feel free to ask me. One that does come into play quite a bit often is the governing law. So especially in international contracts, a company in Taiwan is contracting with a company in Denmark. Okay, well, you need to decide whose law is going to apply to that contract in the event of a dispute. Okay, so if you have to go to arbitration, or you get into an argument, are we going to deal with Taiwanese law, or we're going to deal with Danish law, for example? So that's important to write down in an international contract, whose law governs that contract. So I have told you about IACCM a couple of times. I think I sent you an email this morning about it too. The International Association of Commercial and Contract Management. Now what they have done is they've taken a survey of all of their members, and they have I think they're up to 70,000 members all over the world, in over 100 countries. And they've asked everybody, tell us, what clauses of a contract do you spend most time working on? Where do you spend most of your time negotiating? And also, that's one thing. So where do you spend most of your time? And then the second question is, what do you think is the most important clause in the contract? So where do we spend our time, and what do we think is the most important? So the most negotiated term and the most important term. And for the last several years, the most negotiated term is a limitation of liability. However, we think that the most important term is scope and goals, obviously. Like, what's the actual scope of the contract? What are the goals of the contract, right? And so they work their way down the list. We won't go through all the detail, but number 2, indemnities. In other words, who pays for what? Who's responsible for what? I'll indemnify you. In other words, I'll pay you if I cause you any harm. But the second most important term is the responsibilities of the parties. What each side's actually going to do. And here's the list. There's the top 10, I think. Top 9 is all there's room for. And you see the ones like scope and goals, the most important term, it isn't even on the top 9 negotiated terms. So we don't spend enough time working on the scope and goals. So if we spent more time on the list on the right, working out the responsibilities of the parties, what the actual delivery and acceptance is going to be, what all service levels is on both, that improves the probability of success. The left side is what to do when things go wrong. The right side, if you spent more time, it will be less likely that something would go wrong. So this association, the IACCM, like this list hasn't changed very much, a little bit here and there, in the past 17 years. Like, they've done it 17 times. And so this is what the world looks like. And then they're trying to get people to understand it doesn't have to be that way. We're spending our time in the wrong places. So the schedules that by this we mean the schedules at the back. Schedules or attachments, okay? And this is the technical information. It's not the contract terms per se, but it's just all the technical stuff. And some people think it's the most important, but this is where we actually put the specifications for what it is, whether it's a product or a process or a service, the actual specifications, what the statement of work is. If we're contracting with someone to do something for us, the statement of work. And that's a whole game unto itself, how to write a good statement of work so that it's clear. That's usually an attachment or a schedule to the contract or the scope of work, okay? Stuck at the back, Schedule A, Schedule B, or Attachment A, or Annex A, Annex B, call it whatever you like. If there's any way, if the pricing is very detailed, you might have a whole bunch of different things with different prices, and there might be ways of adjusting the prices. So the pricing might be complicated. It isn't just a single item. You put all that in the back of the contract too. And there will be an article in the front of the contract called pricing, and just say the prices for the various items are as described in Appendix B and will be adjusted in accordance with, or you just say Appendix B, and then Appendix B will have the prices, and it'll also have price adjustment, like whether the price changes every year, goes up every year, goes up with the consumer price index, or if the price is not going to stay the same through the whole contract, how will it change? And then any other guidelines, health and safety, environmental requirements, all that stuff is usually put at the back of the contract. In these days of internet-based contracts, or quite often just say, it'll just give a website, and it'll say the information contained at this location forms a part of this contract. That's something you really have to watch out for, like hyperlinks. We've all seen those. Well, you can have 2 or 3 hyperlinks there, and they can have all kinds of material in them. So if you're signing or being asked to approve, an online contract or an electronic contract, make sure you check all the hyperlinks, because those will be attachments and Annex A and Annex B. And you have to make sure you know what's in them. I know some years ago, I might have told you the story, I can't remember, but I was the contract manager of a company, and someone from the sales department came to me and said, hey, we just signed a big contract with Shell in Holland, the biggest oil company in the world, right? And so a huge company. And this person gave me a 1-page contract, which was just a purchase order, actually. We were a small technology company, and we'd sold something to Shell. It wasn't a very big deal. It was a couple of $100,000, I think, but it was a very big deal for us. And the salesperson was very excited that we had signed this contract with Shell. And it was kind of a 1-line contract that said, we will buy, the technology thing you said from you, here's the price. And that's all the salesperson really saw. But at the bottom of the page, it said, this contract is governed by, terms and conditions, 43-2, 25-6, 19-8, all contained at, and they gave a website. So I just, for the fun of it, went and looked on the website, and there was over 100 pages of additional terms and conditions. And so I asked the salesperson, I said, do you know you just signed a contract with over 100 pages of terms and conditions? I said, no, that's your job. I said, well, I know, but you've signed it. So, and it was fine. It didn't matter. It was perfectly okay. But you do need to have a look and make sure you understand what it is that you are signing. And there's more things. We won't go through these in any long detail, but this is the kind of information. It's just the ins, the nitty gritty, the technical stuff of some contracts. It doesn't have to be there. Obviously, they're not always there. But so the back of the contract can be as important or more important, than the front. So just want to take a quick check here to see. I just want to break this up a little differently so that we're not sitting and doing things too long. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so when we are negotiating a contract, there are various ways of doing it and preparing a contract. Even a lawyer, a law firm, if you go to a lawyer and say, could you prepare a contract for me? They almost never start from scratch. They just don't. They go and find a template that is, kind of like what you've described. It's kind of a standard form contract, and they start with that, and then they'll go through and they'll change the paragraphs as needed. They never start from a blank sheet of paper. So if you're the same thing, if you are faced with a situation and you want to sign up a supplier for something that maybe you've never done before, and you think that the company's standard purchase orders or whatever don't apply, and it's just a whole new thing. There are literally thousands of templates and things that you can go find online now. I probably have several hundred just in my files in my own computer that I've used over the years. Standard templates for various things. So that's usually where you start if you're writing a new one. And you start, or you have a contract that you have used before with somebody else, with a different company. So you go back through it, change all the names. You start there, rather than starting from scratch. So with you can change all the names and dates and the scope of work and everything else. That reduces the amount of effort required, especially if it worked well and all the terms and conditions in it, were appropriate and nobody complained about it and it worked quite well. Then go ahead, yeah, just use an old contract. Change the names and change the dates, and you're fine. You can get advice from corporate counsel. I have my own views on corporate counsel. Lawyers are lawyers, but they will, of course, want to sell you more services, and quite often, even within a company, they'll say, "Oh, we can't do anything without checking with our lawyers, and we have to do everything the lawyers say." And I would just encourage you to become as knowledgeable as you reasonably can. Not to be a lawyer, unless you want to be a lawyer, but understand the contract law, understand it well, so that when you only need to use lawyers to get real advice when you've got a problem, and you will understand what the lawyer tells you. When the lawyer gives you advice, then you'll understand what they're telling you to do, rather than just doing what they say, because they're a lawyer, right? Then you really aren't needed at all. You might as well just have the lawyer write the contract for you. So I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have had to deal with legal staff in whatever country you've come from. And it looks different everywhere. Here in North America, or I guess I could say maybe the English-speaking world, lawyers are a big deal. Has anybody had to deal with lawyers internally within a company, and has it worked well or not worked well, or maybe you've got a little story to tell about what you've done with lawyers? It's quite often everybody's favorite topic, right? Those damn lawyers.
Yes, I have had an experience with our legal secretary. He's a lawyer.
Okay.
And they take a long time to review contracts, a really long time.
Yep.
It takes almost a month for one contract to get reviewed. I'm not even sure if that's normal, but it hinders business operations a lot.
And that was back in the Philippines or here?
In Manila.
In Manila, right.
Yeah.
Well, did it hinder operations?
Yes, it did. Well, what happens is it's just based on trust. So the corporate contract is being reviewed. While it's being reviewed, the sales account executive, what they do, they just apply the terms of the new contract, even without the new contract being approved yet, because it's stuck. And it's based on trust.
So B, just tell us, I mean, were you kind of as a seller or as a buyer?
Actually, in hospitality, we were selling rooms.
Oh, so you were selling, okay.
Yeah, we were selling rooms, and the company would book with us using the new rate based on the new contract, even if the contract was not yet approved.
So whose contract, we're going to talk a little bit about this later, but was it, you're in the hotel industry, was it the hotel's contract, or was it the contract from the company who was booking?
The contract was between it's the contract given by the hotel's contract to the selling company. The selling company had some changes they wanted, so they brought it back to us. Because usually the buyer, the seller, we have a contract, and
you are the hotel?
Yeah, we drafted the contract.
Just orient us. Who were you, the hotel?
Yes.
And you were signing a contract with someone who was going to sell your hotel services?
No, we were gonna sell, we sold room nights to a company.
Right. And they resold them.
No,
Oh.
they didn't resell it. They were
Oh.
booking.
Oh, they were booking. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in a contract with a company who's actually going to book rooms in your hotel.
Yeah,
So you're the seller, they're the buyer.
yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
And it takes a long time for our legal secretary to go through the contract. So we would apply the new terms with the buyer,
Yeah.
even without executive approval yet. It's based on trust.
Well, who made up the new terms?
The new terms was negotiation between our company and mostly from the buyer.
Okay. So these were requested changes to your contract by the buyer.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. You see how complicated it is, right? So the buyer, in this case, the buyer was the customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're the seller.
Yeah.
So the customer has asked for changes to a standard contract that the seller likes to use. And I assume that most of the time your hotel, you were probably a bigger company than most of the buyers would be.
Fairly big, yes.
Yeah, so your buyer is a small company. So okay, so so you're starting from a standard contract. The buyer has asked for a change, and sometimes you just go ahead without legal approval. So somebody from the hotel has to sign the contract anyway, right?
Yes.
But they
that's
might
right.
not. But they might not get legal approval. They just go ahead and sign it.
Well, yeah, because it goes through many channels.
Yeah.
On the sales side, they've already approved it. They said it's okay with them, but the legal secretary still had to review it
Oh, before it could be signed officially
by
signed.
general manager.
Right. Okay.
So that's what
Can the
happened.
general manager choose to sign it anyway without going through legal?
Cannot.
No. Okay.
No.
All right. Well, so and I'm sure thank you, B, for that, because that's a really good example. And I'm sure many of you could have stories, kind of like that, or, similar to it, but that happens all the time. And so it's a complicated situation where you need to know, like when I worked with Hughes Aircraft as a seller, we knew what we could negotiate the terms of contracts with our customers, our buyers, but we were also told we knew what parts of the contract we would have to get legal review on, and what parts we wouldn't. Okay, so we as a contract manager, we're given some instructions, and of course the sales department wants you to agree with everything. And but they were required to at least bring it to the contract department internally. And so we would be the guys who would be accused of holding everything up. Just like B said, the legal guys held everything up. But we were in between the sales guys and the legal guys. So, my job often was to look at what they had done, make a judgment call, have an opinion. I understood the law quite well. And I might go back to the sales guys and say, guys, that just isn't going to work. Like if I bounce that off the lawyers, they're going to shoot it down for sure. So let's not even do that. Let's change it now, and then I'll approve it. I'll pass it on to the general manager for signature. And usually, when the general manager saw my signature on it, saying I checked it and I'd approved it, the general manager would sign it. Because we were trained so we were. And I sometimes would go outside and get advice from corporate counsel. Not approval, because they didn't really set it up that way. The lawyers didn't approve things, but it was kind of my job to approve the contract legally So sometimes they would ask me, oh, did you get a legal opinion on this? And I would say yes or no. And I had to defend um, my position. I said, yeah, I got a legal opinion on that, and they think this is okay. And so, or we're doing most of what the lawyers said to do. And so I think on what we're doing, I agree with it and I approve it. And they said, okay, well, it's your job. If you approve it, I'll sign it. So, and then Hughes was a big company and a very, very structured. I mean, we had 200 contract managers, you know, like me, yeah, in the States. But anyway, so it's a complicated game. No question about it. We're not going to go through this in much more detail. What information there, obviously, what's being bought, what's the cost of it, how it's to be shipped, how to be installed. This is an important one, though, however, the acceptance clause. This is usually, or when trouble does happen, this is where it happens, because the two parties haven't taken the time to write down how if these are goods, or if it's going to be a report, even harder. If you're hiring a consultant to write a report for you, and you know, do you write down what the acceptance criteria will be? How will the buyer, you, accept the product? When? Do you give yourself the right to review it, or do you have to accept it as soon as they give it to you? So the whole acceptance topic can be a real problem if you haven't spent enough time at the front end defining it. Warranties, we all know what those are. Remedies, liquidated damages. What happens if things go wrong? Clauses specifying consequences for late performance, damages, and of course here, this is where you would put bonuses in. Most people don't at all. But what happens if there's early performance? Could you as a buyer put in a bonus if the supplier does better than they're required to do? If they deliver sooner, if they deliver more sooner, if the quality is better than is required under the contract, if they deliver a better product, is there a bonus? If they do sooner, and this is usually not done at all, because, well, gee, that'll cost us more money. But anyway, it's a whole different topic. But the remedies for when things go wrong, but bonuses are almost never done, and they should be. Boilerplate, that's an English term for all the standard conditions at the back, sometimes referred to as the fine print. Generally, it doesn't get negotiated. Like that thing I talked about, the Shell one, you know, there was like 100 pages of boilerplate, standard terms and conditions. And so you just need to be aware that it's there. And if you're the buyer and you're asking a company to accept your standard contract, then you better be able to explain what the boilerplate terms and conditions mean, because they may ask you, well, I read in the back here in this, Article 26, what does this mean? If you can't explain it, how can you expect them to accept it? And dispute resolution mechanisms, arbitration, mediation, rent a judge or whatever it might be. How are you going to resolve disputes when they happen? Because inevitably they do. International contracts. So if we have a dispute, where are we going to get it fixed? If we're going to go to arbitration, there are a few, usually, and that's a big deal, but arbitration is usually done in some neutral party, a neutral country, and it'll be carried out in a completely different city. Geneva is a very popular city for doing arbitrations. Vancouver has actually become quite well known. The IAABC, International Association, or the BCICAC, British Columbia International Commercial Arbitration Center. And Vancouver has become quite well known now for a place where two companies will come. It could be, like we said, one company from Taiwan and one from Denmark doing business together, and they get into a real dispute they can't resolve. They decide to go to arbitration. So arbitration is done in a neutral country. They could pick Vancouver as the location to do the arbitration, and in front of a judge and an arbitration committee or whatever, and it can be done here. So where are you going to do it in the event of a dispute? And so they'll say the arbitration will be conducted in Helsinki, another popular spot, according to the rules of the International Arbitration Association. What law will we be using in the contract? Whose law is it? We said that before. What currency? It might say dollars. It might just have a dollar sign. But I'm here in Canada and I'm dealing with a company in the United States. And so I think it's Canadian dollars. They think it's US dollars. Big difference. So you got to make sure if you're dealing with two different companies that might deal with two different currencies, make sure you know what the currency is in the contract. And is there a mechanism for fluctuation? What's the governing language of the contract? There was a very interesting case, which I'll talk about another time, about where the language in the contract made a huge difference. So the language could be written, the contract can be written in two languages. I mean, I have had a contract in Indonesia where the pages were literally on the right-hand side of the page was English, on the right-hand side was Bahasa. And we knew that the Bahasa one was the controlling language. So if there was a discrepancy, the Indonesian language would prevail. But we, of course, we read the English one. So language, force majeure. Whoops. What happens when something happens? Usually things like hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, strikes, acts of nature, acts of God. And what happens? Can one party excuse themselves under the contract or not be required to pay, or is there a delay, etc.? So force majeure is a very important contract in international work. Okay, I guess maybe we should take a bit of a break at this point. We've been going for about an hour, so should we take a 15-minute break and then come back and we'll talk about the contract stuff?
Yes, sir.
Give me a thumbs up. Okay, all right. Let's come back at 11:25. Okay, we'll see you at 11:25. Does anybody have any questions before we go? Okay, see you soon. Bye. You can mute your microphones.
Oh, what a busy day. Hey, Kit, how are you? Hello.
Where did you get the haircut? Lucas,
Yes.
where did you get the haircut?
I did it by my own.
So I'm recording again. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to try this out, is I'm going to break you into breakout rooms. And since there's an odd number, oh, maybe there isn't right now. Huh, that would be an even number. One-on-one. So you'd be just with two people. And it's called eye contact. Now, we would normally do this in person, but I think it's an interesting thing to try. I know I'm curious about, when we're on Zoom and you're talking to somebody on Zoom, whether you're kind of looking at them or you get the feeling that you're looking at them, okay? Or are they kind of looking at their screen or looking at their computer? Oh, we have one last person came in. Great. So what I'm going to ask you to do is when you're in your breakout room, just talk to each other and see if you can look in such a way that you feel like you're looking right at the other person, making eye contact. Whether you have to stare into the camera or at the picture. I know I look back and forth between the camera and the picture, and see if you can keep eye contact, if you can, for maybe 2 minutes, and then see how that feels, and see if you can do it, and then intentionally look away, like look somewhere else, like don't even look at the camera at all, like just look, somewhere else in the room, but keep talking. Just keep having a conversation. You can talk about whatever you want, and then come back and try to look each other, make eye contact again. So maybe like a minute of eye contact, and then 2 minutes of looking away, and then 2 minutes back looking, trying to make eye contact. So we'll just do that for 5 minutes, and then we'll all come back together again and talk about how that felt, because I think it's going to be a very important part of negotiation in the coming times, is just learning how to negotiate, when we're looking at each other, through a computer. So a minute, or let's say 2 minutes, 2 minutes of eye contact, trying to make eye contact and talk. And then 2 minutes of looking away completely, like just look somewhere else, but the person can still see you, but they don't see your eyes or anything. You're looking, you can look down in your lap or whatever. So 2 minutes, and then 2 minutes of back face to face. And then I'll call us all back together again in about 6 minutes. So I will do the breakout rooms. I think I have to recreate them. Yeah, I do. We have 25 people. So there will be one room of 3. There'll be all rooms of 2, and then one room of 3. So it makes it a little more complicated. Oh, 24. Oh, I made too many. Excuse me. I had one person all by themselves, which doesn't work. Yeah. Okay, so Daisy, Kaushik, and Tijo, you're in a room of 3. All right, so I'm going to open all the rooms. 2 minutes of talking with eyes, 2 minutes talking away, and then 2 minutes back talking with eyes again. Okay, go. Nick.
Yeah, there's only me in the room 10.
Manpreet's supposed to be in your room, I think.
Yeah, but it's I wait for a while, but there's still only me in the room 10, so
Okay,
I
just a
came
minute.
back.
Just a minute. Yeah, it's supposed to be Nick. Oh, neither of you have joined. Okay. Manpreet, can you hear me? Manpreet? Sorry, Nick. Everything looked like it was going to work okay.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I will move you to room 9.
Okay, thank
You
you.
can join in that one.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Manpreet, can you hear me? Yeah, Nick, didn't it work?
Yeah, it didn't work.
Move to. Okay, I'll try again. I'll try to move you to room 7.
Yeah, okay.
What are you seeing, Nick?
And yeah, I didn't. I still in the main season. There's nothing happened.
Did it tell you were moving to room 7?
No, there's nothing. Yeah, there's still the same. I didn't receive any. Yeah, maybe it didn't work or something. Yeah.
Maybe there's something wrong at your end. I don't know. But Manpreet, I can't contact Manpreet at all. He can't hear me.
Yeah, maybe he could not hear or what.
Well, he was back in the main room. I'm just going to move you back to room 10.
Or maybe I just wait there in the room 10.
No, I should be able to move you. I don't know why that's not working. Yeah, sorry about that. Well, it's only another minute or so anyway, so.
Okay, it's okay.
Yeah. Manpreet's got his microphone off. Unmute.
Yeah. Now I can turn on the video. So the main idea of this of this is to practice the eye contact, right?
Yeah.
I think it's also important.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
we,
Well,
we,
maybe when everybody comes back, we'll do another short one. I'll rearrange the rooms and we'll do a short one again.
Sure. Okay. Chandel is back. Hello, Chandel. You haven't
Hi,
had your
Nick.
hair. You haven't had your haircut.
Yeah, and I gained weight. It's lockdown weight.
Yeah, I just had my haircut last weekend.
Oh, nice
The-
haircut.
Yeah, the store just opened several days. Quite a lot of people.
Did you have to wear a mask when you went and got your haircut?
Yeah, I have to wear a mask, and the one that who got my haircut, she's also wear the gloves.
Oh.
Wow, did everybody get a haircut? All the guys got a haircut?
Not me.
As long as you have a trimmer at home, it's everything is fine.
No, look, gentle, yeah, Oh, Roy.
Manpreet, are you here? Manpreet, are you here?
Let's eat Cheetos.
So,
You always eating up.
well, I'm sorry, Nick. I couldn't get Nick into a room because Manpreet didn't respond. But,
Could not contact my
Oh
boss.
no.
yeah.
Waiting for him in the room.
So, comments on that? Was it fun? Did it work? What happened?
It's so difficult to make contact in the camera.
That's because you're eating.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to have contact and eat at the same time, for sure. What else? Any kind of comment?
Sometimes when you try to make the eye contact and then you break away for a second, like it's like conversations these days, wherein you're in the dinner table, then suddenly somebody whips out their phone. It shows that you don't know if that person is listening when they have their phone on and they're not looking at you while you're talking.
Yeah.
It feels that way sometimes.
Well, when you were just speaking, B, when I looked at your picture, it looked to me like you were looking at me. You must be looking right into your camera, are you?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So you're not looking at your screen. You're looking at the camera. Is like the camera dot above your screen?
Yeah, the dots above my screen, and because what I do is I put the video, the Zoom box, the app that's on my screen near the dot.
Yeah.
To establish better eye contact.
Yeah. So it's weird. Like I'm looking at the green dot of my camera now, and it probably looks like I'm looking straight at you, but I'm not. I'm looking at the green dot. So, any other thoughts?
Oh yeah, I just realized why we cannot have eye contact, because we're not looking on the green dot. We're looking on the screen. So I said, where is he looking at? And then he's moving as well, like walking.
Who was your partner?
George.
George. So George, how did it work for you?
No, it wasn't me. It was the other Joel.
The other Joel, the other.
Joel, oh Joel.
Sorry. Peace, guys.
So Joel, Sam, how did it work for you?
Sam.
We can't hear you.
Where are you, partner?
Sam. Unmute yourself, Sam.
Hello. Sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, Sam.
It's confusing because you have to look at the camera, then you have to look for the reaction at the screen. So it's it's difficult.
Double eye contact.
I can't take my eyes off your hair, but.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You like it, Sajib?
Yeah.
Good haircut.
No, he doesn't cut it. He's growing it.
I'm planning to grow it.
Ah. So I wonder if somebody's going to come up with a computer where the camera is actually in the center of the screen, like so that it could be behind the glass, and so you could look. You could be looking at the screen, but you're also looking at the camera because that's where the camera is. Right now, the camera is in a different place. So yeah, we're looking at the camera or we're looking at the screen, one or the other. I'm sure that will be possible to do. But I know when you watch on the television, you watch the people who are doing the news, and they're looking straight into the camera, but they're also reading the teleprompter. Like they're reading the news. They don't have it all memorized. But I don't know if any of you have seen that, but what they use is a piece of glass that's reflected at 45 degrees. And so it reflects the words to them, but it's also a piece of glass the camera is looking through. So that's why they're looking right at the camera, but what they actually see is not the camera at all. They see the words that they're supposed to be saying. So it would be just like looking at your screen and seeing yourself, and the camera is behind the screen. So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody comes up with something like that for a computer. It would really help on the whole eye contact thing. Like I'll try looking at my green dot when I'm talking, so it will. Does it seem more like I'm talking to you now that I'm looking at the green dot? Because I really can't see myself. Yeah. Other thoughts? What happened? Rehab.
I was with the trend. I tried to look at my camera, as you said, 2 minutes and then turn away. But I found it very difficult. I think she's not seeing me properly, and as well, I'm not being able to decide where are her eyes looking at. So yeah, it's very difficult even to speak when you're looking aside or something like that.
Yeah. So compare it to, imagine you were in a room, physically in a room, talking to that same person. You know, when we're talking to somebody, we don't look at their in the eye all the time anyway. So if if we weren't doing this exercise, how did it feel any different? If you're just talking to somebody like this, does it feel any different from what it would feel like if you were in person?
I think yeah.
You think what? Sorry.
Yeah, I think it will be different if you're facing the person you're talking to, because the eye contact, also being able to see how he or she contacts you, gives. Eye contacts help you to decide whether this person is telling the truth, is lying, is trying to hide something away from you when you're face to face.
Ah, yeah. Anybody else? Is it better or worse or easier or harder? Alexander, your name's on my screen. What do you think?
Well, I believe that it is like way harder to make eye contact when you're on a distance, because you have to have so-called double eye contact with the dot and the picture screen.
Yeah.
And we tried our best, and we had a good conversation. We made a pause, and after break, to be honest, I didn't notice any differences in like behavior. So it's hard for me to make a good note or to find something interesting in this. That's it.
Well, I think that's interesting that you said that. So you've said what you really are saying is that that the conversation was okay.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that much harder than it would have been if you had been in person. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that it is really hard to find the difference between between the this before pause and after pause, the discussions between before pause and after pause, because it's hard to understand, see clearly a person and have a really strong eye contact, because you have to always go from camera to the screen and vice versa. So, yeah.
What I was asking was though, comparing it to what you would compare it to what you think it would have been like if you had been in person. Is doing it this way, and anybody in the class.
It would be significantly easier.
Sorry, Alex, what?
Yeah, it would be significantly easier to have eye contact if I could see a person in real life, not on distance. No.
Does that make it easier to have a conversation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Because you can choose when to have eye contact and when not.
Yes.
Other thoughts from anybody? And we're really doing a little bit of a survey here on how well Zoom works, right? Is it a good tool if you're going to be negotiating, and how is it harder or easier or to have a conversation using Zoom versus having a conversation live?
And I would like to add that it really shows that we have to adjust, because it's really different. We have to adjust.
How is it different?
We have to adjust to make a to have a good conversation, because first of all, of this double eye contact with the dot and the person, and that you can't understand exactly when to focus on person's eyes and when to I mean these sort of moments.
Yeah, for sure. Other thoughts on the benefits or otherwise of using Zoom?
Yeah, escape.
Yeah,
I found that when comparing conversation via Zoom and the real conversation in live, so there will be a little bit different because of the distraction around us. So I had a talk with Amon, but I'm sitting in the room only myself, so I can concentrate on our talk. But he was outside of the house, so I think the feeling and the distraction are different.
Yeah, because so Kim, can you turn on your camera for us?
Yes.
There we go. So now we get to see you, and it doesn't just feel more comfortable. I think for most people, for us, maybe not for you, but I know for me, it's more comfortable when now I can see you talking, and it makes a big difference. Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is that so the difference when we are meeting in Zoom is that we don't know what's the other distraction around the other people.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. For sure.
So when I'm not looking at you, so I hardly know that are you really listening to me? Or
Yeah.
thinking of something else? Yeah.
having a conversation with somebody else. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's hard. It's harder to do that, right? Yeah. I am listening to you. I promise.
I know.
Anybody else? So let's get some more thoughts. I think it's worth spending a few minutes on.
I found that while I was speaking with Ben, whenever I looked away from the screen, it's as if I couldn't hear him properly.
Oh.
So when I'm looking at the screen, I could hear him well. It's like you felt a little disconnected when you look away from the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. And Tracy Ann, what's the biggest difference between using Zoom and doing it live for you?
The interaction, because with Zoom, I think you can be distracted, but if you're in the same space with the person, even if you get a little distracted, it's not for long, you come back into the conversation quickly. But while you're on Zoom, I think you could get distracted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Thank you. Okay. Well, I think it was a worthwhile thing to do. I hope it was fun, except for Nick and Manpreet. Are you back? Manpreet is
Hello?
here. But,
Yeah.
yeah, Manpreet.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here.
You didn't join your breakout room.
Yeah, sorry, I had a problem with my device.
Sorry?
I had a problem with my device.
With your device?
Yeah, I'm using a tablet, so it was hanged.
Okay. So I'm sorry, Nick. For some reason, I guess that messed everything up when one person couldn't.
Yeah, that's.
So Nick and Manpreet couldn't do the exercise. Well, I guess that's part of the game, isn't it? The technology. We're so dependent on the technology, and if the problem, like you have a problem with your device, like Manpreet did, then it can be difficult. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. And I want to talk a bit about different kinds of contracts. And like I said earlier, at the beginning of the class, you don't worry about trying to memorize these things at all. All I just really want you to, and most of them are described in your textbook, but the key here is you're probably going to hear some things that you've never heard before. Different kinds of contracts. Everybody thought, and then so that's the message. There are lots of different ways of structuring your deal, and it isn't just a matter of a fixed price. And so, what I want you to come away with from this is just knowing that, given a situation, you might be able to pick a different kind of a contract. A different kind of contracting method, let me say that would suit your situation much better than just an ordinary, like a fixed price contract. So let's go through them a little bit. And I say there are a lot of variations here, and don't worry about trying to remember them all. So the contract that we all know is a firm fixed price. You're buying a desk, for $500. Next week, period, done, fixed price. No, but how about fixed price with escalation? A contract over a period of time, maybe it's a 3-year contract, and I'll pay you $500 for the desks in the first year. In the second year, I'll pay you $525. The third year, I'll pay you $550. So it's not fixed price, it's fixed price with escalation. The price goes up over time, and you define all that at the beginning. Fixed price with redetermination. It could be $500 for the first year, and then you say in the second year we will renegotiate. But that does, you still have a contract, but you've agreed to renegotiate the price or redetermine the price in the second year. Fixed price with incentives. You know, I'll pay you $500 in the first year, but if you can deliver on a Sunday, because that's a good day for me. If you can deliver on a Sunday, all of them on Sundays, I'll give you an extra $25 per desk. Or if you can deliver a bunch of them before 3 months from now, I'll pay $25 more. So you offer some sort of an incentive to the supplier to do something for you, and you will increase the price. You'll adjust the price with some kind of an incentive. It can be anything, different kinds of incentives. So those are fixed price contracts. Now, cost base, and this is an area that most people don't really understand at all, where the contract is based on the supplier's costs, what they incur. Okay, so you may say, I will pay you, let's say from the example of a desk, okay, I'll buy a desk from you. Rather than $500, I'll pay you whatever it costs you. If it costs you, so much for the wood and the steel and everything, and so much for the labor, what it actually costs you to make it, I'll pay you that. Plus, I'll pay you a fee over and above that, so you're making a profit. And how much I pay you over and above your costs, depends on certain things. And maybe you can deliver on a Sunday, or the same incentives, or if you use oak wood rather than pine, I'll pay you a bonus, etc. So the incentive fee. So based on cost, that takes. We'll talk about risk in a minute. So cost sharing. I recognize that I'm asking you to make a special thing. It could be quite expensive. So I'll share the cost. I'll pay 50-50. We'll have an agreement to do something, and I'll share the cost with you, especially if it's an overrun. Time and materials. I will pay you for your time, and I will pay you for your materials. Okay, and maybe I'll pay you for your time at a fixed rate. A fixed rate per hour. I'll pay you, $50 an hour, $100 an hour, plus then your cost of materials. Cost plus fixed fee. I'll pay you your cost plus $100 flat fee. Okay, so whatever it costs you to make the desk, I'll pay you that, and then I'll pay you $100, a fixed fee over top of that. Okay, so the firm fixed price. We know all that stuff. This is the standard. It's the most basic one. It doesn't change. You get it in an RFP, and it's the simplest and easiest contract. So we don't need to spend any time on that. That's the normal. Okay. Now, but when it is fixed price, the supplier is locked in, and if it's generally a rising market, the supplier is locked into a price, but the prices are going up. So they're taking on some risk in a longer term contract if it's firm fixed price. However, if you're the buyer and you have locked into a price, and generally prices are going down for whatever it is you're buying, computers, things like that. So the buyer is assuming financial risk in a declining market with a firm fixed price. So the supplier may ask to have a contingency added to the contract if the uncertainty is high. So the buyer needs to understand what's going on in the market before you agree to a firm fixed price. But escalation, okay? Longer term contracts, and as we talked about, the clauses allow the price to go up or decrease in the base price, whatever. And usually it's tied to some sort of an index. Like in Canada, there's an organization called Statistics Canada, StatsCan we call it, and they publish all kinds of indices. There's a consumer price index, there's a labor index, but the consumer price index is one of the most common ones, and they actually publish how much consumer prices have gone up month to month to month in Canada. So you could say, okay, I'll pay you $500 for this desk in the first year. In the second year, the price will be $500 adjusted according to the Consumer Price Index from Stats Canada. So then there's no debate, right? It's not your opinion. It's not my opinion. We'll actually increase the price based on a third-party index. Same thing as for termination. We talked about these. I've forgotten this information was in detail here, okay? So you can determine the fixed price later on with your actual experience based on what's happening in the market. You may not know what the price was at the beginning. It was kind of a best guess. And after a year, so you can redetermine the price based on things that actually happened. It's a little bit risky, but it's risky for both sides. So I guess that's okay, right? Incentives. You could determine, it's the same as all of these methodologies kind of overlap with each other, right? There's a lot of different things that go on, right? And so incentives and redetermination can be pretty much the same thing, okay? Cost-based contracts. That if you ask someone to build a desk for you, and it's a particularly special kind of a desk, it has to fit in a corner, it has to be a certain shape, it's kind of an oddball, maybe a one-of-a-kind, special, customized desk for a particular room you've got, and the supplier says, well, I really can't quote you a fixed price for that because I really don't know how much it's going to cost me to make it. And you could say, well, okay, all right, let's not make it. I understand that. I'm asking you for a non-standard thing that's going to take some design work. So what do you think your costs would be? And he may say, well, I think it'll cost me $600 to make it, but I'm not sure. So okay, well, let's enter into a contract based on that, your estimated cost. Let me know if it's going to be more, okay? And you're taking the risk away from the supplier. So they don't feel like they need to stick in a contingency because they're not committed to a fixed price. So they feel a lot more comfortable, and you just say, well, make sure you disclose to me all your costs, and be honest about it. I'll want to see records of what your costs actually were. What did it actually cost you to, buy the wood and buy the materials and the screws and the things? And then how much time did it take you, and how much do you pay your people? And or how much do you pay yourself? And I'll pay you your costs. So you have no risk. Now, it's a little risky for me because, I don't know how expensive it's going to be. So all you can do is ask the supplier to keep you informed as the work goes on, that how fast are the costs going up. So the economic risk is transferred from the supplier to the buyer. The buyer, I'm taking on the risk, okay? But overall, I may actually pay less. So it does require terms and conditions to be put into the contract. What's an allowable cost? I'm not going to pay you for the gas it takes you to go and pick up your kids from school, while you're making this desk for me, because that cost isn't allowable. I'm not going to allow that. That's got nothing to do with my desk. The supplier said, well, hold it. And if I can't work all day on the desk. I have to go pick up my kids from school. So if you want me to keep working on the desk all day, you're going to have to pay me those costs. No, sorry. So you come to an agreement on what the allowable costs are. And public sector, the governments, they've got really long definitions of what allowable costs are, etc. You see these kinds of contracts in large design contracts where things are expensive, or there's a high degree of uncertainty, like you're designing something and you don't know what it's going to look like at the end. They're quite often done with cost-based contracts. So a cost-based contract can have things added to it, okay? Some sort of a fee based on timing or quality or whatever, okay? you can have cost sharing, you know, 80-20, 50-50, etc. But you need to define all that at the beginning. Now, if I want to just pay you your time and materials, okay, because we don't know, like if it's a repair, etc., etc. Like a plumber coming in to fix something in the house, they say, I'll come in and I'll fix it. I think it'll cost a couple $100, but I don't really know till I get there. But I'll kind of let you know, and then he'll look at it and say, well, I think it's going to be a 2 hours work, but you have to replace that pipe, this pipe, and these fittings, so it's going to be $200 for the materials. And you say, okay, go ahead, but no more than $600 total. And they say, okay, fine. So he gets all done, and he hands you a bill for $550. You know, so much for his labor and his time, and so much for the materials he had to buy, etc. Okay, so that's time and materials, and again, can be done, can be used very effectively, where you can't determine in advance what the prices should be. And cost plus fixed fee, same idea. I'll pay you all your costs, I'll pay you your labor, I'll pay you for your materials, and when it's all done, then I'll pay you $100 over and above that. A fixed fee, that is your profit, okay? But one disadvantage of that is that there's no incentive for the seller to control the cost. He may roll the costs up because he's got no risk, and he gets a fee over and above that. Now this says fixed fee represents a percentage of the targeted cost. So the supplier knows he's going to get at least, like if he thinks it's going to cost him $500 and I say a fixed fee of 100, he knows he's going to get 20% profit. Now, if I say I'll pay you 20% fee, that's different. That's cost plus percentage of cost, or then cost plus fixed fee. So you can make the fee a couple of different ways. So here's how it all kind of goes together. Starting at the top, where the price is fixed, and all the way to the bottom, which is the loosest, if you will. So who bears the risk, the buyer or the supplier? So the buyer, the firm fixed price, generally speaking, is the lowest risk for the buyer and the highest risk for the supplier. And so as you go to less structured pricing, that gives the buyer more risk and the supplier lower risk, okay? But there's another factor that comes into play here, and that is time, which I guess we'll come to later. But how long a contract is it? And that also changes the risk profile as well. But in general, this is how it looks. The firm fixed price is lowest risk for the buyer and highest risk for the supplier. So how do you know what to do? Okay, how do you decide? The market is uncertain, and depending on how uncertain the market is, that will govern whether or not as a buyer you want to commit to a firm price or not, okay? And the seller, the same thing. They may not want to commit if the costs are changing a lot. Long-term agreements, and this is we'll talk about this a little bit, but yeah, if you're signing a long-term agreement, that can increase or decrease risk depending on how uncertain things are, right? So if I'm a buyer and I commit to a long-term contract for these desks, for 10 years at $500, that might be a good thing for me But if generally, desks are getting cheaper, then signing up to a long-term agreement is not necessarily a good thing for me, but maybe it is. It locks in my price, and now from the supplier's point of view, signing a long-term agreement is good, I guess. He has a long-term customer, but it's a fixed price, and costs are generally escalating. Maybe he'll have a different opportunity somewhere else to sell his desks for more, and he may decide to sell his desk to somebody else and kind of default on my contract because my price is too low, etc. So long-term agreements can be good, but not necessarily always. How much trust is there between us? If we trust each other, how does that affect whether or not we would go to a long-term agreement or not? Same thing with market uncertainty, technology uncertainty. When the supplier is building what they're building or making what they're making, can they impact their own costs? Can they do things cheaper? Can they be more creative to make their costs go down? And again, what the total dollar value of the purchase is. So you put those things together in the chart, it gets a little bit more complicated. That we generally thought that the fixed price contract for the buyer was lower risk, but it gets a little bit more complicated. So on the left-hand side here, it says if there's a high component market uncertainty, then the desirability of use of a fixed price contract versus a cost-based contract, the cost-based contract is more desirable versus a fixed price contract. And that's for both sides. So there's uncertainty. The next one down, long-term agreements. Generally speaking, if it's a long-term agreement, both sides probably want to avoid a fixed price contract and go more to a cost-based contract. Is more desirable for a long-term contract just because of the variability over time. And it might go one way or the other, but it's going to cause a problem and if it causes a problem for one or the other, then it's not a good agreement. If there's a high degree of trust, then you don't really need to have a fixed price contract. You can go on a cost-based contract because you trust each other. Okay, so locking into fixed prices is because you generally don't trust the other side. If there's technology uncertainty, computers and the cost of processing power is going down, 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 then you generally don't want to be in a fixed price contract. Okay, you want to be able to adjust both sides. Okay, if some things are going up, some things are going down, and so again, you get the idea of the chart, right? So this is kind of another, when you compare it to this one, yes, here are some general things that make contracts, certain kind of contracts, more desirable for the buyer or the supplier, but then it gets a little more complicated when you bring these other factors into play. And so, there's no clear answer as to whether a long-term agreement, for example, is more desirable than a short-term agreement. There are various factors that come into play. Here's the language that gets used. Spot contracts are based on the price right now. Okay, a non-recurring, it's not going to happen again, or it's a very limited. So I'm paying you the price as so you hear the word spot with commodities, like if I want to buy sugar, or other large quantities, the spot price for sugar, like right now internationally, might be 10 cents a pound. Okay, but if I'm going to sign a contract for sugar over the next 6 months, I probably don't want to agree on the spot contract today. But the sugar industry has said, okay, if the commitment is over short-term contract, the 6-month price for sugar right now is 12 cents a pound, because generally the price is going up. So if you want to commit to a price today that's good for a period of 6 months, that's the price today. And if it's a really long-term contract, like a 2-year contract, then it might be, you know, spot +2. Or they'll say, okay, the long-term contract price for sugar is 15 cents a pound. So we agree on a price of 15 cents now, even though it's 5 cents more than the spot price. But if it's a 5-year contract, we think the price of sugar in 5 years will be like 18 cents. So we'll agree on 15 now. So you pay a little bit more now and a little bit less later. So and that occurs to all currencies, commodities. A currency, I guess, is a commodity. So like the spot price for the Canadian to US dollar, like today, is about $1.35. So it takes $1.35 Canadian to buy 1 US dollar. That's the spot price today. So that's what if you do a purchase on a credit card, they charge you the spot price. But if you want to go and a contract for US commodities, you know, over a period of 6 months, you may look up, well, what's the 6-month conversion price? Well, it may be only $1.28, because we think generally it's going to go down. So the way you might adjust your contract changes depending on what the variability is. However, so long-term contracts, back to what the benefits could be for the buyer. You're making sure you'll get what you want. Your supply is locked in, okay? You have access to technology because you're locked in again, and you know what the cost and price is going to be over a longer period of time, okay? Generally speaking, you'll be able to agree to lower prices because you've agreed to a longer term, which would generally mean more. So volume leveraging, okay? I'm not going to buy only 20 desks, I'm going to buy 500 desks, you know, and you should get a better price so long as you're prepared to commit, okay? And of course, the desk person, they know now they can plan better. If they're planning for their desk factory or whatever, they know they've got an order from you over the next 5 years for, you know, 500 desks, so that they can do better planning, okay? However, there are some things that come up with long-term contracts. So what they call opportunism here. So the supplier, you sign a long-term contract. Well, maybe as I said, he may find another customer somewhere, and he'll sell to that customer rather than you, or then come back to you and say, well, you know what? Yes, I signed a contract with you, but you know, I think something's just happened now, and there's a huge demand for my product, and I've got another buyer who will pay me $600, so I can sell to him or sell to you. You know, what do you think I'm going to do? So even though there's a contract signed, the supplier may come back to you if something has gone to their advantage, and they try to take advantage of you. You may decide that to contract with a supplier for a long term, but are they the right ones? Are they going to be around in 5 years? Are they going to go bankrupt? Are they going to go out of business? You know, they'll make the right products. So have we picked the right supplier? And then, is there a fair distribution of risk? So when you take into all these factors that we talked about, you know, the risk for the buyer and the risk for the seller, all things considered, is it a balanced negotiation? Is it a fair distribution of risk? Have we picked the right length of time? Have we picked the right price? Have we picked the right incentives? Have I got the right supplier? So that I'm very likely to get what I want over a long term, and the seller will benefit from being in a long-term contract with me. Because there are some downsides. So the supplier opportunism is the one, obviously one. Selecting the wrong supplier, the volume uncertainty, you know, it can be a problem for the supplier. The supplier may have to give up other business, maybe, if they can't expand, if they sign your contract and then a short time later, they get another customer who wants lots of desks, they either have to give up that business or they have to invest in expanding their factory, et cetera, which might be a good thing. Okay. And maybe the buyer is being unreasonable in a long-term contract. So these are the risks for both sides, right? So it's not always a good thing. It's not always a bad thing. You need to take into account the various factors. So if you are going to go into a long-term contract, it depends on certain things. You can still put to take care of the uncertainty. If you make your initial price too high, and it's one of the things that you're going to adjust, say on the fixed price today, and we'll inflate it by 2% a year, 3% a year, which might be fine for you as a buyer. But if your initial price is too high, then you're paying too much today and you're escalating it. So you're going to pay even more, too much. But if your initial price is too low and you force the supplier to sign up, then they're not really motivated to, do you a favor. And if they find a different customer, they're more likely to sell to them than to sell to you. So what kind of adjustment mechanisms do you want to put in? What kind of an index, consumer price index? Or will it be just in the industry? We'll adjust our price based on the average price of office furniture, all the desks being sold by a particular store. And if they all go up by 10%, well, then I'll increase the price of my desks by 10% because it's a related product, okay? Maybe the supplier can make, after he's made the desks for about a year, he can make them even better, make them cheaper, different material, etc., make them faster, and maybe I'll pay something a little more based on improvements in the desk. And then you can put in, evergreen, penalty, and escape clauses. Evergreen is a clause that says the contract will continue on for a certain period of time, and nothing will change. You can put penalty clauses in, or bonus clauses, or then escape clauses like, force majeure and things like that. Okay. So the long-term contracts is an important topic that because people generally want to go longer term. Everybody thinks that long term is better than short term, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Any thoughts or comments on that? Has anyone had any experience, or good or bad, with where you may have either been involved in a long-term contract that maybe didn't go so well, or maybe it did? Or any other questions about that? Okay, so I don't think I'm going to go to IT systems contracts. That's US consulting contracts. This is worth spending a few minutes on. If you are buying services, this is very, very, very common these days, especially doing a lot of outsourcing. If you're buying consulting services, then you're hiring somebody to come in and do some work for you. Okay, they are not an employee. and this may affect some of you. I don't know what you've got asked. Some of you have got part-time jobs, and that's why we're going to talk about employment contract in a minute. It's very important that you, when you do take a job here, is that make sure that you are an employee, because otherwise you do not get employee benefits, and nor is the company responsible when things happen to you. So when you take a job with an organization anywhere here, just make sure that you're clear on whether or not you are an employee or not, or whether they're just paying you a fee. Like as an example, I am not an employee of Langara. Okay, like I'm not actually a full, like a registered professor at Langara. I am a contractor, so they're paying me, to do this work. But I don't get any pension benefits. I don't get any health benefits. I don't get anything that the professors at Langara do. I take care of that all myself. They just pay me a fee, okay, to do this. But was my choice, and there are various reasons for that. So you need to be clear, and I'll be happy to talk to any of you if you are considering a job and they're quoting, that they'll pay you this much. Just make sure you understand that whether you are an employee or not. And so I said, I'll help any of you with that. So when you have a consulting contract, who owns the intellectual property? So like, for example, good example, actually, the Langara contract, they give me the material to teach. Like, I didn't make this stuff up. They've given it to me, so I don't own any of this. If they ask me to design the course and teach the course that I design, then I would say I own the intellectual property because I made it up, and I would want to be able to use that course somewhere else, because I'm independent, and I do teach other places. That's why I'm not an employee. And so the ownership of intellectual property. Now, residuals are the things that are left over, and issues that can come up kind of relating to intellectual property. And then copyright ownership is very much the same as intellectual property. Who owns it? The buyer and the supplier. Works made for hire. So things that you ask somebody to make something specifically for you, okay? Like build a house, anything like that. Who owns it when they're done, okay? Or a report. Like I WorkSafe BC is a big organization here in BC, and they hired me to come into the company and help them analyze their purchasing function and make recommendations on changes to the purchasing function, and et cetera, et cetera. So I was hired to do that. So I filed a report. What I did when I gave them at the end was a report with recommendations. So that was the works that I did for them. You have to have a written contract saying all that stuff. What do they want me to do? What do they want in the report? What's the content? Where can I work? Who can I talk to? And then, how much they'll pay me, per hour or per day, etc. And who owns the product when I'm done? They did, obviously, it's theirs. They paid for it. So consulting contracts are a game, unto their own, okay? So when you are hiring an outside consultant, now this is usually what the consultant wants. Okay, like in the case of me, I'm trying to avoid any misunderstandings, so I want the contract to be written really, really carefully. Assurance of payment, I want to make sure I get paid. Okay, I want to avoid liability if I can, so I just teach, and in this case, and so I don't want to have clauses in there that would cause me to be liable based on the contents of the report that I wrote or things like that. So in the case of WorkSafe, I wrote the report and I give it to them, but I don't want them to be able to come back to me and say, oh well, we did what you said we should do in your report, and as a result, the building burned down. So we think you're responsible for the building burning down because we did what you said. So I want to make sure that there's nothing in the contract that says I can be held liable for things that they might do according to my report, and then they try to hit me with the costs of things that happen when there may not have been a connection at all. That's prevention of litigation, the whole lawyer thing, right? By being an outside consultant, you are independent and you can maintain more freedom. So I can do this work, for example, as a consultant. I can do it for other people. I'm not, generally speaking, when you work for one company as an employee, you're not allowed to work for a second company who might be a competitor, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas as a consultant, I could conceivably provide services to two companies who are related or who might even compete. Okay. We're not going to get into this in any detail, but these are the kind of things that you would put into a contract with a consultant. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Contract with bidders for interest. Yeah. If construction contracts here in Canada is a specialty, it really is a specialty, and you need specific training in construction contracting, and there are different programs that you can take because awarding contracts to do actual construction is a very, very different market. I have done very little bit of it, just a bit, and I've taken a couple of short courses, enough to know that I don't know enough, and I would never pretend to be a construction contract expert. So I knew if I was working for a company and they wanted to build a building or something like that, I would say, no, I'm not the person. You need to hire a specialist who knows how to manage construction contracts. It's a whole body of law and a whole body of practice that applies to that is very specialized. Has anyone here done any construction contracting? You ever had a contract for somebody to build something for you or for your company? Anywhere? Okay, well, you might hear, but I'm always amazed, when I watch a big tall building going up, I have no idea how they do all the timing, and they're pouring concrete, but the wiring has to be all in there before they pour the concrete, and the plumbing and everything has to be all predetermined, and I have no idea how they do that. Yeah, these are all annual contracts, national contracts, corporate agreements, national buying agreements. That's one good thing, or blanket order. The governments like to do these national buying agreements and blanket orders, that they'll sign a contract with you, and this is a good thing if you're a supplier, that the government must sign a contract with you to supply you with, I'll pick on desks again, that they may say, we don't know how many desks we need over the next year, but we'll agree on a price of $500 right now, and we agree that we'll buy all our desks from you. And when we need them, we'll order them. And sometimes it'll say, approximately when and approximately how many, or it might say if we buy 100 desks, the price is 500 over the year. If we buy 200 desks, the price is only 450, and we'll make adjustments at the end of the year. But government people love to get these blanket orders from governments because you'll get paid, you know you are their supplier, and it's a good deal for your company for sure. So they're all different types of purchasing agreements. So again, I encourage you, if you end up working as buyers or on the buying side, be aware that there are lots of different ways of doing things. It's not just a question of, bang, issuing a purchase order. There are different things that work very well depending on the situation, and that's how you distinguish yourself from ordinary buyers. That's how you go from being a junior buyer or a buyer's clerk to a junior buyer to an intermediate buyer to a senior buyer to a buyer's manager, purchasing manager. Is the more you know about these various things, then you can contribute in a different way. Online catalogs and e-commerce, of course, that becoming a big thing all the way along, right? Of course, we haven't talked about these terms: shrink wrap, click wrap, box top agreements and licenses, and we will probably in a later class. But shrink wrap, which is the terms and conditions that they stick inside software. When you buy something at a store and you open the box, and it's all sealed up in plastic, and it's some sort of electronic device. When you open the plastic, quite often, and the piece of paper falls out, you have agreed to the terms and conditions in that contract. Click wrap, same thing. When you're on a website, that it says to use this website, you hereby agree to our terms and conditions, and you go click. That's called click wrap. And so there's some question about how enforceable those things are. I don't know what a box top agreement is or a license, other than quite often if you open a package, you have agreed to the terms of the licensing. Okay, like a software disk, when there used to be like that. You open the package, or it'll say on the top of the package, by opening this package, you agree to the terms of use, including warranty. Digital signatures have been around for a while, and there hasn't been still not any really reliable way of having a purely digital signature, even to the extent now that for contracts that need to be enforced, people still go back to written contracts or a signature, a physical signature, and they scan it and send people a piece of paper with the actual signature on it, and then that was actually the signature. There are all kinds of different signatures that are trying, everything from fingerprints to retina scans and things like that, but they're not being used in commerce, if at all. So on the business side, they still want to have, by and large, a signature, and a signature on what. I know that some years ago, I was involved in a dispute with, I was here, the organization was in New York, and we were in a dispute over what, clause 13 said. And I was talking to this woman on the phone, and she was getting quite irate with me. And she said, well, it says right here in the contract, Article 13, it says this. And I said, well, it doesn't say that on my page. Like I'm reading the contract here. These were physical paper. And I said, I'm reading it, and my Article 13 doesn't say that. And she read hers to me, and I said, well, that's wrong. Your version isn't right. And she said, well, what do you mean my version is wrong? Maybe your version is wrong. And I said, well, look in the lower right-hand corner of the page. And in the lower right-hand corner of the page you're reading, is there a little squiggle, like an initial that kind of looks like a V and a P? And she said, no, there isn't. And I said, well, I'm sorry, then you are reading from the wrong version of the contract. You're not reading from the version of the contract that was actually signed. We went through a whole bunch of drafts, but the person in our company, when he signs a contract, he signs the last page, but he also puts his initials on every page of the contract. So we know, not if this is back in the days of photocopying. So we make many photocopies of this contract, but you are not reading from a certified copy of the contract. So the line went very quiet because she was mistaken. She didn't have the right contract. So that's still a challenge. Is how do you know you're reading from the correct version of the contract, or the one that was actually signed, versus one that can be changed so easily, because we can electronically change contracts so easily. I can send you a contract and leave something out of it and say, here's the contract. So that's a challenge for sure. And if anything, it's getting worse. Okay, that's about all I wanted to cover for today in terms of the material. We're done a little bit early. If you want to, if you wish, we can discuss the employment contract a little bit that I sent to you. And I want to send it to you on the chat anyway, just to see how that works. I'm going to stop the share here. So, well, I'll tell you what. I've never done a poll. Let's do a quick little poll. Add a question. Question, how do I edit? Add a question. I guess that's not going to work. Launch the poll. Okay, forget it. Forget it. There we go. Okay. Who would like to talk about the employment agreement, or just call it a day so you can prepare for the test next week? How about a thumbs up for calling it a day? Okay. Thumbs up for discussing the employment agreement.
About the test next week.
Yep.
Question. Would it be the midterm or what?
There are two. Yeah, this is the midterm. Yep, the midterm test. Yep.
Okay, the coverage.
13 and 14, just chapters 13 and 14. And the page references are all in the course outline. It gives you the exact pages of the textbook that we have covered.
Okay.
So you don't have to read. It's not all of chapter 13, not all of chapter 14. Just the parts we have read, just the parts we have covered. It'll be multiple choice mostly, with a couple of very short answer questions.
Okay. How many items?
I beg your pardon?
How many items?
How many questions?
Yeah. How many
I can't remember. 30? maybe 30 questions, maybe 40 multiple choice questions, and 3 or 4 very, very short answer, like just a few words, but you write them. And it's going to be done on Brightspace, and it'll be done at a certain time. It'll be the same time as our class, 10:30, and you will have a limited amount of time to do it. Obviously, it's open book because you're doing it at home, and so you can look at whatever you want. But there will be a very limited amount of time, so you won't have time to go look up all the answers. You won't be able to do that. There won't be time for that. It'll probably be an hour and a half. I'm thinking, not 90 minutes. That'll be more than enough time for you. And yeah, and it'll be done on Brightspace. I don't know exactly how that's going to work. I'm going to find that out later this afternoon, actually, how that will. But I wrote the test, or I set it up, so I know what's on it. But so yeah, it's multiple choice, you know, and the questions are like, which of the following statements are not true? You know, so. And there'll be a statement, you know, or which of the following statement is not true. So you have to be able to read them all carefully and then pick out the one that is not correct. So it isn't just remembering stuff from the textbook. Yeah.
Okay. And anything on the contracts as well that you have sent?
No.
None. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
That's just reference material.
Thank you.
So let me just, I just want to try this to everyone. We're all still, oh, one person has left. Oh, no, you're all here. Sorry. To everyone, type a message. You're here. Oh, to everyone. Well, maybe I needed. Did people get this agreement on the chat line or just by email? Because I don't know how to actually now send it. Let me try one more time here. File. Oh, well, there we go. Sent successfully. So you all should have received now on the chat line the employment contract, which I guess you can click it and open it.
Yeah, I was able to download it. When I click it, it was automatically downloaded.
Okay, can you open it and read it?
Yeah.
While we're on the call?
Yeah, and the file is in good shape. Sample employment contract, this agreement made
Yeah.
as of blank day of blank 19 blank between. It's in
Yeah.
good shape, in good order.
It's 14 pages long. Okay.
Yeah.
So we don't. I wouldn't suggest we go through this in any detail, but I wanted to send you that one just so you could go through it and see what an employment contract can look like. And there's a couple here. It's not all one. Oh yes, that's right. I remember now. There are a couple, maybe 2, maybe even more than that. 10. Yeah, there are 3 in there. Three different ones. Okay. And it shows how they get filled in. So okay. So I wanted to send that to you a couple of different ways. Now I guess you got it all. That's really kind of cool the way that worked. So if any of you ever have any questions about an employment situation, you're considering accepting a job, part-time or whatever, and you're just not too clear on whatever the situation is, please feel free. Email me or phone me, and I'll either be able to answer your question or maybe just point you towards somebody who can. Because I don't want you to be signing up to jobs that you regret later. You've all been here a few months now, so you've probably been through this loop. I already got part-time jobs, but anyway. Well, if there are no other questions, then let's call it a day. Let's finish early, and I will be sending you the details of the test, the when, the where, and the how in a couple of days. But if you have any questions about anything as you're studying, please feel free to send me an email or give me a call.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Then we'll call it a day. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Sir,
Thank you. Have
goodbye.
a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye. See ya.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.
Rehab, did you want to stay in the meeting? Did you have a question?